Well, good morning once again, St. Andrews and All Saints Online. Thanks. I never know if people are going to, I'm good with interaction, okay? I enjoy it. But my name is Chris Smith. I am the campus director, the digital campus director for All Saints Online, and it is my privilege to be up here once again to be able to share with you. And we are so happy that you are here. Just kind of reiterating what Pastor John said when he was up here. No matter where you are on your faith journey, we are happy you're here. We are happy that you are choosing to spend your time here with us. And when we say all are welcome, we actually mean it. So thank you for being here this morning, for being a part, whether it's your first time, your 1,000th time, or even beyond. We are so glad that you are here, whether in person or joining us online. So this has been a kind of weird week for me, all right? I'm just going to be upfront at the very beginning. I, like many people, have a process, and I follow that process exactly. And the only time I change it is when I've adequately looked through and thought through every single possible difference in that process. I didn't get to follow my process this week. So we're going to have fun together over these next 20 minutes or so, okay? We're going to be talking about finding the blessed, see, look, there we go, starting off. For all of you people that are my age and older, Etch-a-Sketch the last 30 seconds. Those of you who are younger than that, ask your grandparents what I mean by that. But so things were just kind of crazy this week. And the reason being is because my oldest daughter graduated high school yesterday. And thank you. I mean, she's not here. Just saying, okay? Maybe Jordan was right when he said that the day you guys left was his best day all year, okay? I'm just saying, our piano player this morning, Jordan, was actually one of her directors in choir and show choir for the last 4 years, so that was really just for he and I and for her to hear later and roll her eyes. But this had me feeling really nostalgic this week. Because when my oldest graduated, my oldest son, I thought, well, that's a little weird. But now that my second child graduating, I'm starting to feel like it's a pattern and that it's going to continue through the younger 3 children too. And I'm just not 100% sure what I think about that right now. But it had me feeling nostalgic, and I was going through old posts on social media, and I decided to share a couple of them with you that are more than 10 years old. So the last time I was up here, I talked about this clip from a message of mine back at Christmas time that got over 100,000 views. And it was me talking about what I believe is one of the worst Christmas songs ever. Yes, I'm still saying it. But the reason why I'm bringing it up again is because as I was scrolling through old posts on my social media, I found one that just proves to you that this is not a recent thought. Okay, so I'm going to show you that I'm consistent and honest. So here's my post from 10 years ago. If you have me on Facebook and you look back exactly 10 years from December, you will find this post and me saying, can we stop using this song? Okay, so I'm honest and I'm, consistent. I also have a reputation, for maybe being kind of funny, but also being just a little rebellious, just a little bit. So, here was another post I found of me drinking out of a jar that just has a sign on it that says, do not drink. For the record, it was completely safe. That was actually the glass I used in my office for years ago. I've also been known to be a little critical of the modern capital C is what I would call it church, like the global church, not just within these four walls, but just the entire community that calls themselves Christians or follows after Christ. But I've been known to be critical of them from time to time, and so, yeah, you can take a look at this meme that I believe strongly in, okay? You have the path that says everything Jesus says, and then the car screeching to take the exit to use anything that Paul said out of context. But after I spoke last time, a couple of people kind of mentioned to me like, hey, I noticed that you don't really speak all that nicely sometimes to longtime like Christians and churchgoers. You kind of just go in for it. And I just want to say that if you have ever felt that or I've ever made you feel that way, I 100% respect that and also agree with it. I have been very critical of churches and church communities throughout pretty much my entire adult life. So I want you to know that I see you, I hear you, and today, well, you're probably not going to like today very much either. Sorry. But no, I really do respect that and stuff. And we're going to be talking this morning about the blessing of thinking in a new way. And that's not a comfortable way, because what it means is that we have to think and define blessing in the same way that Jesus defines blessing. And that sounds great because we know that Jesus is all about love God, love others. We know that Jesus' message is an inclusive one, a one that brings people in, doesn't reject people. But when we actually redefine that word blessing, it becomes a little difficult. Here's the thing, I'm not perfect. I'm very far from it. I mess up daily, but my job and what I feel is kind of one of my callings in this life is to keep getting closer to the way that Jesus loved, the way that he lived, and the way that he challenged the world. It's to keep doing less harm and offering a more honest picture of who Jesus is. Not the sanitized cultural mascot version of Jesus that we oftentimes try to portray, but the true heart and the true word of Jesus, the true words of Jesus. That is what I hope to convey each and every time, not just being up here, but just throughout my day, throughout my week. It's not about getting it right all the time. It's about being honest, it's about being real, and it's about doing my best personally to look more and more like Jesus, to sound more and more like Jesus. I will never get there, okay? I will always be imperfect. But maybe the goal isn't perfection. Maybe it's just to look and live the words of Jesus more and more. Say it another way. If you read the Bible and you go to church and your desire is to mostly hear things that agree with what you already think or just make you feel good about yourself and never challenge your assumptions, then you are absolutely worshiping someone or something, but it just might not be Jesus. Solid way to start, right? That's right, okay? We'll have a little bit more fun this morning, hopefully. I don't know. That's a big statement to say, but here's the thing. So last week I saw someone post a picture of their brand new patio furniture set, and it had the caption, #blessed. And y'all, I'm telling you, it was nice, okay? Like, I would describe it as kind of like coastal grandma meets like Joanna Gaines with some like Magnolia accents, okay? It was that level nice. Like, there were matching throw pillows on the patio. Like, I didn't even know that outside throw pillows existed until this picture, okay? I didn't know that was a thing, but here we are. Now, I'm not here to hate on patio blessings because I think patios are like the best part of any place, is to just be able to sit out in nature, unless you live where I do and live with your backyard facing Q, and then it's great to live in cars honking at all hours of the night. But I love patios, so I'm not hating on patios, not hating on patio blessings, but it did make me wonder, what exactly do we mean when we say we're blessed? And I thought even more about that's a pretty serious theological question. What does it actually mean to be blessed? Because based on social media, being blessed could mean that you got free guac at Chipotle. It could mean that, your kid made the honor roll, or that you found a parking spot at Costco on a Saturday, okay? Let's just pause there, because that one might actually be divine intervention, all right? I don't want to speak for God ever, but just that one might be. But here's the problem. If blessing means my life is going well, what does that say about the people whose lives aren't? What does that say about the people whose lives are falling apart? What does that say about the folks in our communities who are grieving, who are struggling, who are oppressed, who are being subject to injustice, or anybody sitting in the middle of a storm that they didn't choose? See, Jesus' idea of blessing looks real different than our Instagram filter. It's not about glow-ups and gains. It's not even about winning. In fact, when Jesus starts his first public teaching, the Sermon on the Mount, he kicks it off with a list that completely redefines what it means to be blessed. His list of blessings, it's upside down, it's backwards, it's even a little confusing, because Jesus isn't just giving us new rules, he's giving us a new mindset. What I want us to consider this morning is, what if the real blessings of God are meant to unmake us before they can remake us? What if being blessed looks more like discomfort and transformation than comfort, clarity, and control? What if it's a new way of seeing ourselves, seeing others, and seeing the world? There's blessing in thinking in a new way. So let's look at this text together. It is Matthew chapter 5, starting in verse 1. And these are the opening lines of Jesus' most famous sermon, in my view, the Sermon on the Mount. And these verses are often known as the Beatitudes. Starting in verse 1 of chapter 5, it says, "Now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them. He said, 'Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." Now you will notice as I talk these next few minutes that I will use the terms blessed and blessed. They're the same thing. Here's the deal. I don't know why, but when I'm reading this text, it is blessed, at least for me, okay? I think it sounds better, okay? Maybe that's, an old English way of saying it, but so I will go back and forth, because every time I'm referencing the text, I will say blessed. Every time I say blessing or blessed outside of the text, I will just say blessed, because that's, So yeah, don't confuse the two. They're the exact same thing. It's just the way that, it's the way that I hear it when I read it. But the first thing I want to do is take a look for just a second at the context of these verses. All right, because remember that whenever you are reading the Bible, context matters. That is the most important thing, in my view, when you read the Bible that you have to understand is who it was written to, why it was written, who it was written by, the purpose of it, the culture around it. All of that stuff is incredibly, incredibly important. Context matters. So we've got to understand what Jesus is doing here because it is a little wild. See, this is Galilee, a rural, working-class, Roman-occupied territory. He's not standing in front of a group of privileged, polished religious elites. He's not talking to people who feel blessed. Jesus is speaking to the crowd who is made up of the overlooked, the exhausted, the politically oppressed, and the religiously disqualified. These are not the influencers of the day. Imagine living in Galilee, under constant surveillance, under heavy taxes from a foreign empire. You're scraping by while religious leaders tell you that if your life is hard, then it's probably your fault. That sound maybe a little familiar? Kind of might sound eerily similar to a large number of churches and Christians in the United States today. But we're not going to talk about that today. That's for a different day. I've done that twice now, and one of these days I'm going to actually have to make true on that, and that scares me. But I'm going to have to actually talk about that on a different day. But this is Jesus' first recorded public message, and he is talking to a crowd of peasants, fishermen, spiritual outcasts, people burned by the religious system, and folks barely hanging on. And what does Jesus say to them? He said, "Blessed are you." This is no minor statement. In Jesus' day, people believed blessing was proof of God's approval. If you were rich, healthy, respected, then you must be righteous in the eyes of God. If you were poor, you were sick, or you were struggling, well, then you must have messed up. Jesus completely flips that script. He says, you who are grieving, blessed. You who feel like you have nothing left to give, blessed. You who are longing for justice that seems like it'll never come, blessed. Even more than that, Jesus is announcing that God's love is bringing a little bit of heaven to earth, and it's for you. This was not just a minor thing that Jesus was saying. So let's take a closer look at some of these verses. Looking back at Matthew chapter 5, verse 3, it says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." That's the first blessing that Jesus mentions, and it's already kind of like throwing hands. Because let's just be honest, nobody wants to be poor in spirit. To me, it kind of sounds like the equivalent of being the kid who forgets their lunch on field trip day. Like, that's the kind of spiritual equivalent of being poor in spirit. It's kind of that, like, you're looking around and everyone, like, has their brown paper bag and you know that you left yours on the table and you're the only one who's, like, not pulling anything out of a bag and just that feeling as a child. It's the spiritual equivalent of that. Poor in spirit means spiritually bankrupt. Like, I've got nothing left to offer. No resume, no impressive theology, no shiny testimony or story. Because when you finally stop pretending that you've got it all together, God can actually work. So I believe that being blessed by being poor in spirit also shows the need and blessing in letting things go. Letting go of self-sufficiency, letting go of pride, letting go of the curated, filtered, emotionally detached version of Christianity that we sometimes settle for. And when I say like letting go of all pride, I mean the pridefulness that we get stuck on ourselves. And again, I say this a lot, but let's be honest. Especially those of us who have spent much of our lives in the church. Because we're often tempted to pretend, to smile through the pain, to spiritualize our suffering, to say God is good all the time, when what we really mean is, like, I haven't cried in the bathroom yet today, so things are going well. Jesus isn't blessing the mask. He's blessing the real. He's blessing the raw, the vulnerable, the empty-handed, because those are the ones who can actually receive something new. Jesus is inviting us to think in a new way, to see our emptiness not as failure, but as the first step towards fullness. In other words, you can't be filled by the love and blessing of Jesus if you're already full of yourself. Jesus blesses the spiritually empty, not the spiritually impressive. Continuing on, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. So this one hits kind of hard to me, because we've all been mourning or burdened by something. It could be loss, it could be loneliness, it could be a fractured faith, it could be the broken world around us. And Jesus doesn't say snap out of it or fake it till you make it. He says, blessed are you. Now, he's not blessing pain itself. He's blessing the people who don't numb it, who don't hide it, who don't run from it, the ones who are being honest about the ache. And in the next verse, meekness or humbleness, that's not weakness. It's strength under control. But y'all really think about it. When was the last time that humbleness was a trend that you were seeing? Because it's sure not one that I see. We reward loud, brash, attention-grabbing, but Jesus says the people who change the world aren't the ones shouting in comment sections. It's the ones walking humbly, quietly doing justice, loving mercy, showing up. However, when I talk about quietly doing justice and showing up, I do have to make the point, so none of us confuse this, that what that doesn't mean is that there aren't times to get loud, be loud, and flip some tables. So understand the context of what we're talking about. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. The blessing isn't for the people who think they've already arrived spiritually. It's for the people who are still hungry. The people that are still seeking, still thirsting for justice, healing. They're searching for transformation. They're searching for the world to be made right. Jesus here is not blessing the satisfied. He's blessing the people who ache for a better world. And this too can be hard. Because sometimes we are so desensitized or numb to the things that are happening in our world. When things get uncomfortable, we turn up the noise, we scroll, we binge, we shop. But Jesus said, don't run from that hunger for justice. Let it lead you. Let your dissatisfaction push you toward justice. Let your pain push you towards compassion. Let your longing become holy fuel for change. This is the blessing of thinking in a new way, thinking in a Jesus way. When you stop asking, how can I feel better? And you start asking, what does the love of Jesus require of me right now? So if you find yourself ever deconstructing or reconstructing your faith, whatever that might be, or if you're still searching, still craving something real, you're not behind, you're blessed. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the pure in heart. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are those who are persecuted. I could do an entire message on each one of these individually. But let's kind of zoom out here for a second. The merciful, they get mercy. The pure in heart, they get to see God. The peacemakers, they get adopted into the family. The persecuted, yep, they get the fullness that can be seen of heaven on earth. This is Jesus flipping the whole system. Not blessing the powerful, not blessing the religious showboats, not blessing the ones with a curated, camera-ready life. He blesses the broken, the desperate, the oppressed, the marginalized, the real. These really seem to be for those who've been, honestly, in the church community for a while. See, we love our truth. We love our traditions. We love our theologies. But Jesus seems way more interested in whether our hearts are soft than if our theology is tight. Jesus chooses mercy over moral superiority, peacemaking over picking sides, purity of heart over platform building. But we live in a world that trains and programs us to pick sides, to hold grudges, and categorize people like we categorize our Spotify playlists. We have our annoying coworker playlist over here. We have our definitely going to block him on Facebook over here list. We also have our list that is, just labeled way too into the Nebraska Huskers #avoid. Don't play with me because you guys know. We all know a certain set of that people in that Spotify playlist. But here's the thing. Jesus invites us to see people through a new lens, to think about enemies as beloved, to think about mercy as more powerful than winning, to think about peace as an active choice, not the absence of conflict. This is not a soft faith that we are talking about. It's a strong one, because it takes strength to show mercy when we'd rather respond in anger. It takes strength to be a peacemaker in a world that is addicted to outrage. But when we think of the world around us in this new way, when we start seeing others the way that Jesus does, there is blessing there. And look, I know that it's easy to become cynical, and it's easy to become jaded, and sometimes it's really easy to get loud about all the wrong things, but Jesus is inviting us to see people the way that he sees them, not as problems to fix or enemies to defeat, but as beloved, every last one of them. And that's where blessing lives. Jesus' blessings aren't promises of easy lives. They are invitations into a new kind of vision. When we start to see the world like Jesus does, we stop measuring blessing by our bank account. We stop needing to win every argument. We stop confusing comfort with purpose. We begin to live in a way that looks a little more upside down, a little more like heaven coming to earth. The Beatitudes aren't a to-do list. They're a vision for the kind of people who will thrive in the upside-down realm of God. They're not saying you should more and more, or try being poor in spirit this week. They're saying when you live in these painful, honest, humble places, God meets you there. And if you're there right now, if you're grieving, if you feel broken or left out or exhausted, you are not cursed. You are not disqualified. You are not forgotten. You are in the perfect position to experience the blessing of seeing the world in a new way. And that's where blessing truly begins. When I say the blessing and thinking in a new way, I don't want it to get confused, though. I'm not talking about just like, it's not that bad. Find the silver lining. That's not what this is about. This is about finding the blessing by defining blessing the way that Jesus does. So if you're sitting or you're watching online today, and maybe you're feeling just a little empty, a little tired, a little brokenhearted, or longing for something more, I just want you to know that you are not off track, because you might actually be the closest to blessed that you've ever been. Will you pray with me the prayer that Jesus taught us? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.